Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or if you prefer, distinguished delegates and honorable stakeholders. And I invite you all to please fill up the seats around the table. It makes it easier for communication, and don't be shy or bashful. We're all family here. And everyone is really looking forward to hearing what you have to say and watching you deliver it. It also makes it easier to exchange through the microphones. And in case any of you have stepped into the wrong room, this is the technical expert meeting on mitigation, focusing on cross-cutting issues in urban environment and land use, whatever that means. And we are dealing with city-level collaboration to achieve emission reductions and sustainable development. I keep telling my team not to write these things in UN speak and translate them into English, but I am sure that your esteemed panelists here are going to translate, well, looking at the first slide, maybe not translate them into English, but maybe into French, German, and I think I've covered them. We are also as interested in what you have to say about what happened or didn't happen for you, as much as we want to hear what our panelists have to say. And in fact, I intend to hold our panelists' feet to the fire. If they say they earned a pot of gold, I will ask them to produce it. If they said that they grew apples and oranges, I will ask them to distribute them around the room. So we are going to make sure that everything they say, they can demonstrate to you and show you how you can do that too. We have as one of the missions of the convention and its Paris Agreement is to make implementation felt. You must be able, at whatever point the parties determine to take stock, say, I felt it. The people in my country felt it. They can tell you what implementation looks like, feels like, smells like, and how it got my kids into university. So something has to happen. And we are looking at how one of the big sectors can make things happen. Governments take on commitments, demonstrate ambition, but it's people who have to do it. And the biggest group within any country that does it are the cities and people in the city environment. I got stopped coming through customs in the UK. I had to change airports, and the customs man, even though I had a diplomatic passport, wanted me to prove that I was a diplomat. So when I told him I worked for the UN on climate, he spent the next 10 minutes asking me questions on climate change. And I was feeling really proud because he spent 10 minutes asking me questions about climate change. So he understood, as a customs officer in the UK, about climate change. So even though that is not an implementation matter, he felt it. It reached him. So we want to be successful in having that same impact with regards to the implementation. And I am really looking forward to hearing how each individual multiplied into each group, each street, each town, each city ends up producing the impact. And that impact gets us to where all countries want to get to, which is to ensure that our future generations thrive in the climate and environment that we give them. That was never an issue. How you get there is the issue, but we all want to get to the same place. So now hopefully I have set the task so impossibly difficult for our panelists that they will struggle, have to get off of their scripts and speak to you as human beings. I unfortunately have to turn to someone or one country who has been helping in the training and development on a South-South basis of a huge number of countries, experts, both in Asia and outside of it. The Singapore, as a city and a city country, has taken a lot of unique steps. Some of them because they wanted to, and some of them because they need to. In fact, some of the best advancement come because you need to. And we are very fortunate, and she is very unfortunate because I only speak bad English. Linda Siow. Yeah, there you go. And this bit I can read. The Deputy Director, Mitigation, Resilience Policy and Planning, the National Climate Change Secretariat Strategy Group, and it's in the Office of the Prime Minister, to give us our first look at some of the ideas we can discuss and perhaps take forward. Linda?
Thank you, Don, for setting the very impossible task. Thankfully, I have no script, so I won't have to change my plans for today. Don already introduced me. My name is Linda. Hi, everyone. I'm very glad to be here today. So if we could bring up my slides, which don't... It's supposed to be about smart nation, so technology is always an issue when it comes to this.
Tell us a joke.
But that one's not part of my script, Don. But maybe I'll talk a bit more about, I guess, how Singapore, us being in the Prime Minister's office, has been helpful. And that's in one of my later slides, so that way I don't take up extra time from my 7-minute presentation. So it helps that for us, the Climate Change Secretariat is sitting within the Prime Minister's office. That means it's not tied to any of these ministries, specific ministries, and that gives us a very good overview of what's going on. Nevertheless, should I wait or should I go? Ah, perfect. Okay.
No, hang on.
No, not so.
I cannot see it on my screen.
Oh. That's okay? Yeah. Okay. Right. So anyways, the rest of my presentation will share some of the initiatives that we've been undertaking in trying to build a smart and sustainable Singapore. So next slide. Just a brief background and outline. We'll talk a bit about Singapore and our approach to mitigation, and then I will highlight a few specific examples on what we've been undertaking some smart solutions in our urban environment. So next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. As Don already mentioned, Singapore, we're quite unique in that we're a very small island, only 719 kilometers squared. So if you look at the map there, you'll see us, or maybe you won't see us because we're really tiny. But if you zoom in to the little dot on the map, that's where our island, the shape of our island there. Just to put the size in context, so we're about 1/10 of the size of Shanghai city, but with twice the population density. And as a city and also a country, that means we have no hinterland. So we have to put our power plants, reservoirs, ports, industries, commercial buildings, housing, transportation, infrastructure, everything within the 719 kilometers squared. In addition, we have constraints such as no natural resources and also some difficulties in accessing alternative energies due to the lack of large river systems, no conventional geothermal resources, as well as low wind speeds. Now, solar is something we're looking into, but due to the limited land space and also intermittency from tropical cloud cover, there are some difficulties with that. But one of the examples I'm going to highlight shows how we try to overcome some of these constraints. Next slide. I talked a bit about our whole of government approach in that the National Climate Change Secretariat sits under the Prime Minister's office. And we've established an interministerial committee on climate change, so the orange bar on top. And that's chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister in Singapore. And we have members from all the relevant climate change ministries, such as the Ministry of the Environment and Water Resources, Trade and Infrastructure, Ministry of Finance, National Development, Transport, and all of their respective agencies as well. I've tried to put the logos of all the ministries and agencies under the IMCCC on the screen, and there was just not enough space, so that gives you an indication of how massive this IMCCC is. And the Interministerial Committee then oversees all our climate change policies and plans through international negotiations, mitigation, as well as resilience. And this has really helped us to come up with a more coordinated approach in some of our mitigation actions. So in the next slide, this is roughly an overview of our mitigation efforts. As I mentioned previously, due to our lack of alternative energy resources and also the fact that we've done an early switch from fuel oil to natural gas, the cleanest fossil fuel, which now accounts for 95% of our power generation, we see energy efficiency really as a key mitigation strategy across all the sectors. So for instance, in encouraging households and industry to use more energy efficient equipment and appliances, and also in promoting the adoption of higher efficiency technologies. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So while some of these efforts have been driven by the government, we do recognize the importance of collaboration with industry, academia, as well as the general public in really enhancing our mitigation efforts. And so we've set up what we call living labs across Singapore, to allow these stakeholders to come together to co-create innovative solutions for climate change mitigation within our urban setting. Why we call these living labs is because we're really encouraging these collaborators and researchers to come and test their solutions using real-world infrastructure and facilities in Singapore, which will leverage the fact that we're a small country. We have a dense urban landscape, high population, so this is a great testing ground for people who have ideas and solutions. And I'm going to highlight the three living labs that I've circled there in my following slides. So next slide. Solar, I promised I would talk a bit about that. So we have Solar Nova, which is a government-led initiative where we want to promote and aggregate solar demand across government agencies. As I mentioned previously, due to our limited land area, most of our solar panels are deployed on individual rooftops. So it helps to have Solar Nova as a program to aggregate the demand across all these individual rooftops. And we have this into a sizable amount, which we then structure into tenders, which we get businesses to bid for. Our first Solar Nova tender was 76 megawatt peak, which was awarded in December 2015. And this was for deployment on 831 public housing blocks and across 8 government facilities. The company that won the tender was the homegrown solar developer called Sunseep. And they've utilized a very innovative business model through Solar Nova, where the company installs, owns, and operates the solar panels. And so there's no upfront cost to government at all. And then the company and the government share the savings from the solar electricity generated through a power purchase contract. Besides partnering with businesses, through Solar Nova, we also work with academia. So we have a Solar Energy Research Institute of Singapore, or CERS, and they've really helped to support this program through technical studies, feasibility studies, so helping us to understand how much land is available, how much space, rooftop space is available for solar deployment, and what the solar potential is. Following on that, we're also partnering CERS to do a test bid on floating solar panels on reservoirs. And if that's successful, that means we can possibly scale it up, deploy more floating solar panels on our reservoirs, and that can really help to increase our solar deployment. Next slide. In smart homes, I thought it'd be very interesting to just highlight that, unlike many other cities, about 80% of our population actually lives in public housing, which we call the Housing and Development Board, or HDB flats. So that means that there's a lot of potential for the government to try and implement a lot of these smart solutions in the HDB estates. So the Smart HDB Town Framework tries to leverage Infocom technology to see how it can make its estates and towns more livable and efficient through 4 areas: smart planning, smart environment, smart estate, and smart living. What's good about this is that HDB can aggregate demand from all its HDB residents, and then the industry can also test some of their solutions in the HDB towns and then take feedback from the residents and perhaps tweak their solutions and make them more marketable. So next slide, I just wanted to highlight Punggol, which is one of the emerging new developments in Singapore. It's in the northeastern part of Singapore, and there are many new developments coming up. So there's really quite an opportunity for developers and also residents to come together and test solutions. So I'm just going to highlight some of the things that Punggol Eco Town is implementing. We're using 3D simulation modeling. So the HDB planners use this tool, which gives them real-time data to allow them to design the towns and where to implement, say, the apartment buildings versus recreational facilities versus transport infrastructure. So what the simulation model actually gives you is environmental data. For example, wind flow, solar irradiance, shading, and that helps you to cite things where you can maximize natural ventilation and help to give the best thermal comfort to the residents in the HDB flats. Also, home energy management systems, or HEMS, will also be made available to the residents. That really allows them, gives them the power, empowers them in a bit, because it gives them energy usage data, so they know how much they're consuming. The HEM systems will also alert users. For example, if this month your energy usage is much higher than last month, it'll send you an alert, and you're like, okay, maybe I should watch how much I'm, turn off the lights when I'm not using them, and so on. Users can also use the device to remotely turn off their air conditioning and lighting. For example, if they left the home and they're like, oh, I forgot to turn off my air conditioning, they can use the device to do that. Some of the funky features are like smart fans, which are linked to sensors. So if the temperature and humidity goes above a certain threshold, then the fans are activated. Similarly, with smart lighting, the motion sensor activated. So HDB planners can also optimize the way they do lighting provision. So if they've observed from the data that certain parts of the day in certain areas, there's very low or even no human traffic, they may want to dim the lights further. So that can actually reduce energy usage by about 30%. Next slide, please. In the area of mobility, we have an aim to be a car light nation with a 2030 target of a 75% public transport modal share. So some of the things we're doing, people have developed an app called, for example, Beeline SG, and that's about getting commuters to sort of crowdsource for where they want shuttle bus services, and then bus routes will be then deployed where there's a huge demand. We're also experimenting with self-driving vehicles. There's a pilot ongoing to test the feasibility of shared on-demand point-to-point mobility. And we see this probably more applicable in first and last mile connectivity. So for example, to get from the subway station to your home or your office. Lastly, there's an electric vehicle car sharing test bed, and we've tied up with Bolloré, the French company who runs Autolib, the Paris car sharing system. And under this pilot, we see up to 1,000 electric vehicles and 2,000 charging points to be deployed island-wide. The first batch of 125 vehicles and 250 charging points will be ready sometime in the second half of this year. And they'll be in a few towns such as Punggol, which I mentioned in the previous slides. And I guess what the Land Transport Authority really wants to do is to make more data available so that people can come and develop solutions. So they've set up a data mall, which makes transport information such as congestion, public transport availability online. So the public and academics can develop the solutions and come up with apps. Next slide. So these are just some of the initiatives that we have that we see forming into our vision of Singapore as a smart nation, where we've harnessed technology and data to implement solutions for the people and make lives better. So obviously everyone, government, people and industry all have an important role to play in this. The government by providing the infrastructure, policies, regulations, and enabling environment for people to come and test and experiment their ideas. And we hope that some of the solutions we've come up with can also be shared with other cities. And we think that's going to be more important in the coming years as the world's population becomes increasingly urban. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to listening to the rest of the panelists and the discussions ahead. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Linda. And I have to note, she actually did what we asked her to come here and do. Doesn't often happen. She presented lots of ideas on what individual cities can do and showed you where they did it, exactly what it is that we asked. And by the way, I'll get back to this. You're infringing on the CCC name here with your IMCCC. There's only one UNFCCC, so
Sharing of best practices.
Sharing of best practices. So to become successful, just become a CCC. Unfortunately, our city of Bogotá now has to raise the bar. But in order to do it, Veronica has assured me that she has spent the last month practicing in the mirror just to convey the right facial expression to ensure that everything she has to say sinks in. As Director of Urban Regulation in Bogotá Planning Department, I welcome another strong collaborator with the Secretariat from the Gulak region. You have the floor.
Thank you very much for the invitation. My presentation has a different approach, so I'm hoping to have met like the asking topics for this meeting. First of all, on behalf of the Bogotá City Planning Department team, I would like to thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to share our experience and be able to acknowledge other ones in other cities in the world within a very useful group exercise of discussion and debate. Next slide, please. Okay, this is Bogotá, the red line, and you can see only 25% of Bogotá is urban, and the rest, 75%, almost 122,000 hectares are rural, and most of it is protected land. But Bogotá doesn't function by itself. It actually functions with the other 33 municipalities surrounding Bogotá. So we need to rethink planning within the metropolitan area of Bogotá and stop thinking only Bogotá by itself. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry, back. So this is 2010, 8.7 million in Bogotá. Next slide. As you can see, this it's going to happen, and all the territory that it's around Bogotá, it's getting with higher developments, with low density, with no public transportation and no public services at all. Next slide. This is what land use regulation was planned by the beginning of the century in Bogotá and in the municipalities around. Next. But this is what actually happened. Whole the area was occupied with low density. This is 4 to 60 houses per hectare. And in the municipalities around, the urban perimeter was increased without any urban regulation at all or control. Next slide. This is the type of urban housing that we have. In the first picture, we see informal occupation of really risk land use that is not appropriate to live in. The second one is higher housing, but without public transportation, without public services. So this means that all the people that live there, that also work in Bogotá, have to move from the city to the house every day by car. And this third image is regular housing, also without the public services that we need. Next slide. This is, right now we have 9.3 million people in Bogotá and metropolitan area, and we have to plan for 2050 that actually we're going to be 12.9 million. Next slide. And also we have to take into account that it's going to be a household size reduction. Right now we have 3.2 persons per house, and by 2050 we're going to have 2.4 persons per house. Next. So if you sum up natural growth, the household size growth, deficits that is right now, we're going to need 2.7 million new units houses by 2050. This is Bogotá and the metropolitan area. Next. And another thing that has to be taken into account is that right now, from every one house that is sold in Bogotá, one house is sold in the municipalities around. And as I said, with no urban planning whatsoever. Next. And this is for social housing, which is a bigger of a challenge because more housing, social housing, is sold right now outside Bogotá. Even if the people work in Bogotá, they are buying their houses outside. Next. This is just a quick example of what's going on in the municipalities around. Next. 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 So as we can see here, these are all developments with low density housing, no public transportation, no public services at all. And most of those people that live there work and go every day to Bogotá by a private car. Next. 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 Okay, and the other problem that we have, it's informal occupation of risk areas. And this happens because of two things. One is that in Bogotá for the last 10 years hasn't been habilitated the only land that Bogotá has for new developments. And the other one is that the municipalities around hasn't planned the expansion as they should be doing because they don't have the resources to do it. Next. This is like the urban sprawl that we're living right now. And that's gonna happen if we continue to occupy the territory as before. Next. So in order to plan Bogotá and its surroundings, we have managed to think of these urban balances that have to lead us for our planning as metropolitan area. First of all, we have to think urban development integrated with environmental sustainability. They can't be seen anymore like two opposites. Second of all, we need efficient urban strategies that can make renovation inside the constructed city in Bogotá, but also think about compact expansion, where we can do it in Bogotá. Third one is thinking Bogotá as the city itself, but also as a region itself. Four, we have to think about strategies that cover the region or the macro space, but also never forget about the human scale, for example, in public space. Five, neither the public sector or the private sector alone can make strategies that could take on these challenges. So we have to work together. And the sixth key factor is that we need to make strategies for urban regulation, but also facilitate specific impact projects that also needs the city. Next. So we have come with a plan to give some response of that need that we're gonna have by 2050. This is just like the organization of where we're gonna make those new developments and how many people can fit in there, right? Next. Next. So this is it. We have another key factor that is we're going to have a new airport projected, which is outside Bogotá, west of Bogotá. So those areas that you see there, the yellow ones, are new expansion places for Bogotá. And inside, along the corridors with urban transportation that we have today, that is called Transmilenio, TRB, we are planning to densify by renovation along these corridors. We already have one decree for 2 of them approved. And also it's really important to give responsible densification in municipalities. As to date, we have signed several agreements with the other municipalities to help them and work with them in their planning strategies as a region. Next. Well, thank you very much. That will be it.
Thank you very much, Veronica. And I can already see numerous questions for further input from you on how to determine where your city is going, and therefore what you need to do to prepare yourself to get there. And it was an excellent example of not just that you had a plan, but you also recognized where the current activities don't go along the plan. And therefore you can see where you want to go and where you are. And very important to ensure that it is done effectively and efficiently. Ironically, that links very well with Linda. And once you have your city, then what activities can you do? Because Bogotá could build those things in as they put up the new plan over the next 20, 30 years. So I see real synergies between the presentations. But in order to get to the dialogue, let me first of all introduce the city of Bonn. Bonn is one of the 3 hosts for the upcoming COP for the Convention, the Protocol, and the Paris Agreement, along with Fiji and the Secretariat. We all host in some way. But the city of Bonn is also where I live. So please, even if he's terrible, be real nice to him, because he's real nice to me. So I'd like to invite Mr. Wagner, who is the head of the Department of International Affairs and Global Sustainability. Sir.
Well, thank you a lot for the introduction, yes, and welcome. Thank you very much for participating, for the opportunity to participate here at this dialogue today. I would like to present or showcase in my presentation some examples of stakeholder participation with regard to our climate mitigation efforts from a perspective of the city of Bonn, which is as you might know, a city with 320,000 inhabitants, so a bit smaller than my colleagues from Singapore and Bogotá. And I would like to show how we deal particularly with our local public in terms of reaching our climate agenda. Next slide, please. Yeah, we set, I believe, quite ambitious climate targets here in Bonn. Originally, as one of the members of the Covenant of Mayors, we were targeting for 20% CO2 emissions reduction by 2020 compared to 1990. But this original goal has been scaled up by a decision by the City Council from 2011 that wanted to have the city to aim for a 40% reduction until 2020. At the moment, no, not at the moment, at 2012, we managed to reduce our CO2 emissions by 18%, which is a total reduction of from 9.3 tons per capita per year to 7.6. And I guess at the moment we will have well reached our 20% goal. But in order to aim for the 40% reduction, this definitely goes beyond the capacities of the municipality itself. So this means we need to really cooperate closely between different governmental levels, be it EU, be it the federal and the state government, but also we need to have a comprehensive participation of different stakeholders, private companies, house owners, citizens. And I want to explore that a bit. Take the next slide, please. In order to follow this idea of a 40% reduction, the City Council adopted an integrated climate protection and adaptation concept, which is, on the one hand, assessing the current status of climate activities that the city is doing or has been done in the past. And it also should identify further reduction potential and costs that would occur maybe if the city would go for this goal. And on the other hand, it also will make sure that the relevant actors and stakeholders are involved in this process. One element of this strategy is the implementation of a advisory committee on climate protection that has been established, that is working already, and that consists of different stakeholders like, for example, council members, scientific institutions, small and medium enterprises, NGOs, local initiatives, and others. And it is consulting and advising the city in its further processes. Next slides. There are a lot of fields of activity or action at the local level, as you're probably well aware. I mean, it reaches from city planning to urban infrastructure, mobility issues, as we just heard, the municipality and municipal policies and structures that can be implemented. And which is also very important, also from our perspective, is the education, communication, and cooperation with the local inhabitants here in Bonn, as well as our partnerships. And I want to reflect on some of these items. Next slides. Yeah, when it comes to planning, infrastructure, and energy, we in Bonn have put a strong impetus on the promotion of renewable energies, solar energy in particular. So the city is very keen to implement solar panels on its municipal buildings or other infrastructure, for example, the Kennedy Bridge here over the River Rhine, in order to enhance the capacity of local energy from solar or from renewable energy sources. At the same time, the city also decided to only consume certified green energy for all its buildings and its settlements and all its municipal plants or companies, like, for example, the sewage plants. We also have a good tradition in activating the local stakeholders, the people here in Bonn, when we started already in the 19th to compensate for green electricity to be fit into the grid. We were, in fact, a front runner here in Germany until a national legislation was taken up by the end of the 19th. So this is also a model of to get support to make people active in energy use of solar energy. We also make sure that new buildings that are built in Bonn meet higher or have to fulfill higher energy efficiency standards than actually applied by the national level. And we are pretty proud that our renewable energy, our local energy mix provided by the public utility company here in Bonn has already a 65% share of renewable energy, which is really good also in German comparison. And they are urged to enhance this quantity in the years to come. The city also take huge investments to modernize its facilities, and we have a combined steam heat and power plant now working with a very high efficiency rate that saves 149,000 tons CO2 emissions per year in Bonn. Next slide, please. Mobility has already been addressed by the colleagues from Singapore as well. So this is, of course, a very important issue for us, because 35% of our total CO2 emissions actually come from the mobility sector. So we do a lot on awareness raising and campaigns for green mobility. As you can see, our mayor, when he took office, he was one of the first things he did. He was ordering a hybrid car. We do have our local transport company that is test driving a number of electro e-buses, as you can see at the picture, and it's also made very prominently and obvious to the public because it's a project, and they aim for a total shift to e-buses in the years to come. We do, of course, have procurement regulations that enable us as a city to procure e-vehicles, for example. And we do a lot of public awareness raising and motivation for to use the bike here in Bonn, bicycle traffic. We are implementing a bicycle street plan, and we are running city bicycle campaigns where companies, but also citizens can join in and then can showcase their involvement. And we're very happy that the UNFCCC was supporting this also in the last years. Next slide, please. Yeah, communication and education is a key issue once you want to get out to reach out to the local public, and this is why it is very important for us to get to reach our climate target. We provided services for the citizens in Bonn, one of which is the Bonn Energy Agency that was founded in 2010, that offers a neutral and independent consulting of private house owners and tenants, also with advice on energetic refurbishment and renewable energy. So they can go there, they can get advice on what they could do at home to save energy. They can also ask for programs that financially supported this. We also implemented a solar roof register in Bonn that can be addressed online. So every house owner, everybody who's interested, can look for his particular building, whether this is suitable for a solar panel on the roof. Because we have a huge potential, in fact, 70% of our total energy use of the private sector could be covered by solar energy if everybody would do so. So this is something that we really want to focus also in the future. We do a lot of public events, awareness raising events, information events like Bonn Energy Day that happens every year, and that is where local companies, but also NGOs, institutions here in Bonn showcase on good examples on how to on energy saving and local sustainability. We also do awareness raising through campaigns that are visible all over Bonn, one of which is Ready to Change. It appeals on everybody to change behavior, to use the bike instead of the car, to turn off the light when they leave the house, or things like this. And one nice initiative I would like to mention today is our Climate Ambassadors initiative. It is addressed to third graders, to people at the school children at the primary school. They can do a climate license. It's a little education book they get, and they have worked through, and then they get their license, their certificate handed over by the mayor. So we have almost 7,000 school children that participate in this approach, and it is a very visible thing. It's also very interested to local media and public, and they had already the opportunity to meet the federal president and get into contact with him and discuss about how he is or what he is doing in order to save our climate. And they also work, of course, in their respective families as ambassadors for climate saving. The final slide I would like to show is we also reach out on international cooperation to have stakeholders outside our city. We do cooperate with some of our twin cities as in the framework of climate partnerships, which is the exchange of experience, the implementation of joint projects within our partner cities on climate relevant issues. We do report as a city to the carbon climate registry as well as to the covenant of mayors. So we showcase and we fulfill our commitment in terms of also demonstrating and also make transparent what we are doing as a city. We are involved in international networks like ICLEI, and we are happy to have multi-stakeholder and multi-level cooperation. I mean, it is very easy in Bonn to get into contact with UN, with other stakeholders, so we make use out of that. And this is also a strategy that we would like to follow in the future. So that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to discuss with you on further issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. I can attest to some of the effectiveness of some of the programs in Bonn. Just this morning, I was in a terrible mood. I was trying to get to work, taking my kids to school first in my very energy efficient car. And I was surrounded by bicycles who wouldn't get out of my way. And they have priority on the road, so all you can do is chug, chug, chug behind them. So the message about use your bicycles, and it's done for fun, but it is actually very effective. And a second one that I was really proud of, 2 years ago, in the city of Bonn, you get your meter read once a year. And that reading determines what your average consumption is per month. So for the next year, you're going to pay 1/12 of that each month. So 2 years ago, my consumption went up, and I got hit with this big increase in my utility bill. And I was determined that those kids were going to turn those lights off, et cetera, et cetera. And when we got our meter reading back at the end of last year, everyone went, yes, it went down. So just something as simple as that made a huge difference to us. But our last presentation, before we have some interaction with you and some additional clarifications on how you might proceed, because we have done things solo, we have now brought on a double act. A double act in one person, but it's still a double act. From Belgium and Benin to you today to look at how actions can be taken jointly and by partners who have established relationships. So, Mr. Paredaens, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Don. Thank you very much to my colleagues also. We had a very nice presentation. I'm here to talk to you about something completely different. I'm here to talk to you about international cooperation and development between two local governances, two local municipalities. And the first one is my own. It's called Zoersel, and it's in Belgium. It's 200 kilometers to the west of here, near Antwerp, and the other one is Bohicon. It's in West Africa, but that's in Benin, and that's between Togo and Nigeria. In Zoersel, we have 22,000 inhabitants. In Benin, they have 200,000 inhabitants. Make the third slide already, please. Next one. Okay. We started with a town twinning back in 2011 when the Flemish government, we have 6 governments in Belgium, to keep everybody happy. One of them is a Flemish government. And they said, okay, we do not want to spend time and civil servants on international development because we cannot follow that up. Instead, here local municipalities, local communities, write us a plan. We give you the money to follow up on international development somewhere in an underdeveloped nation. And you have to do that by strengthening local government by capacity building. 2, your civil servants who have to go over there and train the civil servants over there and share your knowledge. And we decided back in 2011 to do that on 3 pillars. We started with ICT. We built a network, an ICT network in their town hall because they didn't have one. And if you cannot share a file or send an email to the colleague next to you, you cannot give a service to the people. Building a network within a local community, within the town hall, is a start, is a basis of giving services to the people. The second thing is, okay, we need a library. They didn't have a library. They had a library, it was somewhere in a back alley, and nobody came there. We brought the library to the compound of the town hall. We educated people. We had books in there, and now it's really flourishing. And the third thing we did is we started a birth certificate registration. They already had birth certificates, but somebody came and announced they had a little child, a new child. They filled out a paper. They sent one to another government institution, and the other paper was left somewhere in the corner of the building, and it disappeared. But without a birth certificate in Benin, you do not exist. You cannot get an education. You cannot get work. You cannot get an international passport to travel. So you do not exist. And with a good registration, scanning of those birth certificates, then we make sure that people exist, and can develop. They can develop into something more. So what do you need to keep in mind, that we work together between local governances. We strengthen local governances, the governance in the south, by capacity building. That was a first. That's a horizontal project. We work together between civil servants on equal basis. And then we started with a vertical integration of that work. And we spoke to our projects in the city of Zoersel. And we had 6 families in Zoersel who decided to participate in that. And they found somebody in Bohicon, an organization in Bohicon, to work together. A project on alphabetization, a project on handicapped people, supporting schools, and an organic waste treatment program. So in total 6 projects between families in Zoersel and organizations in Bohicon. So Zoersel gave families in Zoersel €1,500 a year to develop some project, and Bohicon gave also money to the local organizations also to start that work. And that I call a vertical integration. We also have a subvention of an agriculture expertise center. I will talk about that later. And what we also do for the city of Bohicon is networking. We incorporating Bohicon, a city in the south, in our network. We have a very large network here in Zoersel. We are next to the European Union. We're next to the UN. It's not far away. And so we incorporate them into our network. Next slide, please. Okay. Back in May 2016, our community council subscribed the engagement declaration for implementing the SDGs in our local governments and long-term action plans. And that was a start to develop our participation. It's a participation with our friends in Bohicon to a next level. Zoersel signed last year the Covenant of Mayors 2030, and at the same moment, Bohicon subscribed the Covenant of Mayors for Sub-Saharan Africa. And we will be making that climate action plan together. So colleagues working together on equal basis, we make the same process to reach the same results, but only with different actions in those plans. At the same time, the Zoo province, where Bohicon is part of, was selected as the pilot region for the Covenant of Mayors by CEMR. Next slide, please. And I bring you a few examples here how Zoersel and Bohicon work together. We offer grants and we share expertise. I already told you that. Another thing is we have an agriculture expertise center in Bohicon that we support also, with educating young farmers to have better, more vegetables, more ideas. We also develop a circular economy there. There is waste management, and we have biogas and solar panels installations and maintenance. We train them how to install a biogas central, solar panels, and how to maintain that also. Also, we have a project for the marketplace with waste management and the Bassin du Siow, that is a water management of the Siow River. When it rains in Bohicon, there is this Siow River, and it just flows through the city center of Bohicon when it rains too much. Next slide, please. But what problems can you experience with working with a municipality in the south? And it is know-how. If you never learned some basics in school, then you do not have a know-how. For instance, I have this waste management project with somebody, and it's a little larvae that eats waste, eats organics waste. But if somebody never understood how a larvae becomes a caterpillar, becomes a pupae, becomes a butterfly or something else, if you do not understand what it is, then you get a phone call one day and you say, everything dies. I said, no, that's not true. They don't die. That's just a new stage in the development of that fly. And it will become a fly, and it will lay eggs, and it will become a caterpillar. We will eat the waste. We also need to support the municipalities in the south, because they do not have the expertise, even on the correct numbers. They do not know how many CO2 emissions they have. They cannot just simply cannot calculate that. And that's why there is also, if something like the Covenant of Mayors for Sub-Saharan Africa is implemented in Sub-Saharan Africa, then the European Union will need to support those municipalities. Otherwise, they just can't even not calculate it. And there's also a cultural difference. If I walk in the streets in Bohicon, I say to people, look at all this waste. And they say, oh, it doesn't matter, because we didn't used to have waste. And waste for us is sometimes luxury. We have the luxury to throw something away, they say to me. We have the luxury to create waste. And very important with all projects you do in Africa is follow-up. Because I hear a lot of projects. United States give $500 million for this project over there. European Union, the French give so much, and just it doesn't happen. Follow-up is very critical. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much for having me here. And
thank you very much. We have heard from all of our speakers with examples of how things can progress. And as you can see, there is no way to do this. There are hundreds of thousands of ways to do this. The idea is to see some of them in action and let them spark what you may be able to do. Some of them are big things and some are tiny. I always like to think that if I take care of my bit and each one of you takes care of your bit, then everything gets taken care of. I just out of personal want offset the impact of me and my family for the rest of our lives. Then I went and did everybody who lived on my street where I grew up, because it is actually a tiny thing. It's not very expensive, but it at least gave me the feeling that I was doing something. Right? One of the key things that I'm always asked about renewable energy, and this one I'm going to ask Linda how that impacted on her, is that many utility companies in developing countries have monopolies, and they don't like their monopolies going away. And a lot of arguments come about you are pushing, say, solar power into the grid, when everybody is pushing solar power into the grid, and then you want to take it out at night when everybody wants to take it out. And there's no way to balance the two. And it's usually a very good excuse for not being able to proceed. I have seen some of the Pacific Island states address this by getting investment in putting in storage capacity, taking away the argument, so that as many households who want to do their own investment in solar power, even though there's a differential in cost, you might sell it to the utility company for 80 cents and they sell it back to you for $1. Yes, but you're still getting 80% off your power bill for the investment that you made. So this idea of making it possible for each individual to take action. So if you're not as well organized in terms of social housing or community housing as Singapore is, where the government can just address all of those buildings at once, perhaps you could invest in storage and encourage individuals who build their homes to do their own solar facilities or wind facility, because you've invested in the storage. So it'd be interesting to hear how storage had an impact in Singapore, and whether or not this is something that Bogotá is looking at. And I noticed that Germany has been doing a lot of individual solar panel projects, and how they are absorbing those into the grid. So I will turn to Linda first to ask how the renewable energy component, from the perspective of the person as opposed to a company, whether that is having an impact, because in many of the smaller countries or many of the developing countries, it is easier to start with those in the country who have the desire and the ability, and then let that impact be seen. And if you could just indicate to me, while she's responding to this, who would like to raise a question or make some comments or give some examples of impacts that they have encountered from this perspective of the cities or small towns, then I will also give you the floor. But first of all, Linda.
Thanks, Don, for the question. So on storage, yeah, definitely we see a role of storage coming in to help to sort of increase the amount of solar in Singapore. I guess the issues with storage is that it also takes up space, which is always our constraint. So we're hoping as technology increases, storage will become cheaper, lighter, smaller, and that we see as another way to increase solar deployment. At the same time, I think what's also useful and what we're also looking at is besides storage technologies, solar irradiance forecasting, because even though we're in the tropics and there's a lot of sun, but we also get a lot of clouds, and then we have a lot of tall buildings, so there's a lot of shading, which moves at different times of day. So if we can understand what kind of solar irradiance we're getting, how do we maximize that? And then with some energy demand management, as well as what we're also thinking is the possibility of kind of like a mixed use district type thing. So for instance, offices, right? The peak energy demand, let's say from air conditioning, is during the day. And then at homes, it's at night when we use more energy. So how do we balance the energy use between different types of buildings and homes and all that to really ensure that the energy demand profile is a little bit more manageable. That way we can use more renewable energy. We don't need as much reserve capacity, and in general, just to create a better energy profile in Singapore. And you had another point about residents. So I guess it's different for us because 80% of our population is in public housing. So the government can just go ahead and put like solar panels on the rooftops of these public housing buildings. But actually the solar energy that's produced from the rooftops of HDB buildings, we use that to power the common areas. So like the lighting and the lifts. So I just wanted to highlight that. That said, individual homeowners who are in landed houses, in private housing, can also adopt solar panels. And what's quite interesting is come 2018, we're putting out what we call full retail competition. So that gives homeowners the rights to kind of buy electricity from whichever retail company they want. And hopefully that will help to increase the renewable energy deployment in Singapore. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And whilst I'm waiting for people to come forward, Veronica, you are in this stage of planning, and it seems to be almost the perfect moment to look at things that you want to introduce. And I have seen the impact of things like putting in cycling lanes, doing school programs to get kids licensed to ride their bicycles, which thank you very much for my kids having to get bicycles and go to school to learn how to ride their bicycles, encouraging the use of public transportation, and the impact these have on emissions from cities, but also the way of life in cities, whether these are coming into your thinking of how you're planning your city to evolve over the course of the next 20 or 30 years.
Thank you for that question. Actually, right now, in Bogotá, only 10% of the population moves around in public cars, in private cars, sorry. So what we're working on is increasing the bicycle lanes that we have. Actually, right now, we have around 100 kilometers of bicycle lanes. We want in 4 years to double that. And also, we have a program in public schools for the kids to ride from school and to school in bicycle. That's a government program. And also we have the plan in 4 years to start the construction of 10 new lines of TRB, the public massive transportation, which is by bus, that it's called Transmilenio. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I was impressed with Koen and how you utilized a connection that was set up for other reasons. Almost all cities twin with another city or have relationships. And you grew that into something else. You used the existing relationship to build on something that also included low emissions or climate neutrality sometime in the future, getting everybody involved. Did you find this a challenge, or did you find it very receptive when you introduced this idea? Because this is something that many cities can do back and forth with existing relationships.
We have town twinnings also with other cities, with German cities, with Spanish cities. But this is special. This city town twinning with the city of Bohicon was especially for development issues, international cooperation, and for us it was a very natural step to take it to another level, because we support the city of Bohicon with our network, and through that network they came into contact with the European Commission, and even the mayor of Bohicon was a key speaker on the last COP in Paris. He's very known. He's very known in Bohicon. It's a very important person over there. And by integrating our network and offering our network, they also had the possibility to sign the Sub-Saharan Covenant of Mayors. And for us, it's just a normal step in the development of our relation, not only by basically building that capacity, building that basis for democracy over there. And the second step was working together between entities in Zoersel and entities in Bohicon. And the third step was developing that as I call it that, a diagonal way of working together.
Thank you. Now, one of the things that makes it easy for governments to reach negotiated settlements is when the position that the governments reach is something that they're already doing. And this was one of the things that greatly benefited the negotiations on climate. If you're going to give a commitment and you worry about whether or not that's too much of a stretch for you to give at this time, but you are told by your stakeholders that that's not a problem, we will get there, or we are already there, it makes it much easier for you to sit around the table and look really good, giving a strong commitment. And one of the key stakeholder groups, subnational groups, were cities who indicated to their governments that, yes, our city is going to that level, so you don't have to worry about making that commitment. And I was wondering from Mr. Wagner whether the actions that they were taking in Bonn was having an impact on what the German government felt they could do if the cities are indicating what levels they're able to reach, whether that has an influence on government's ability and how they act.
No, thank you. I well believe there is a, let's say, stronger recognition in Germany on the potential, on the possibilities of the local level, also from the governmental and federal perspective. We can see this in new forms of cooperation that exist in terms of policy making, but also in a number of opportunities, funding opportunities that are offered by the government directly to the local level. So I well believe there is there's a process where the federal government recognizes, okay, if you want to go ahead with implementation of our climate agenda, then we have to take the local level into account. On the other hand, we all know that the local level in Germany is financially very limited. So of course, the cities, they claim for stronger support if they really want to reach out for the climate goals. So there is a lot that has still to be done in this regard, but first good projects and ideas are underway that we are using. Also in Bonn, when we take, for example, our climate program was financed by the government, and some of the measurements we are taking as well. So yeah, city can set, I mean, and as I mentioned, cities sometimes can even set the speed. I mean, they are, some cities are more ambitious than maybe their national governments. So there can be also a bottom-up approach that the government is then taking into its own policies.
Can I comment on that?
Sure, go ahead.
Don, you said that some governments said it's easier for them to make to say, okay, we're going to reach that target. And in fact, it is because we in Zoersel, we calculated it starting from 2011 until last year, and without really an action plan, we already reduced our CO2 levels by 22% without even knowing it. But we just calculated, and apparently we already reduced with some small actions 22%. So actually, it's very easy to reduce the first 20%. It's very easy. It goes natural. It's the second 20, 25, 30%. That's going to be difficult. That's really going to be a change in the minds of people, and an adaptation on local level, doing things, riding your bicycle to school, not take the bus, stuff like that.
Thank you. I will first of all give the floor to Norway and then the European Union. Norway.
Thank you, and thank you to all four of you. It's quite impressive work that you have been doing, and it's quite different, but it all moves in the same direction as you said, facilitator. My question is a bit, how important would a local champion be in each of your cases, and then how do you institutionalize this work in a way that it's no longer dependent on one person? Because in many cases you kind of need a few people or one person to start things, but it's even more important to make it keep rolling and grow. Thank you.
I will give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you, and thank you to all the presenters for really excellent presentations and for sharing your expertise in this area. You touched upon several aspects which is very, very crucial and very important about the integrated approach to city planning. To have an integrated approach throughout different policy areas. I mean, in the European Union, we have integrated urban environments consideration into transport, energy, environment, adaptation, and so on. It really is a cross-cutting aspect, and what you also touched upon in the facilitator is basically how do you, if you're starting up something and then you end up that could have co-benefits in other things. How do you plan strategically across different policy areas and with different ministries and different government structures to kind of have like a longer term approach to that? That's very interesting, and there's also something that would be interesting to hear a little bit on you elaborating on. You also touched upon the importance of sharing knowledge and connecting different networks to one another. And I also noticed in your presentation from Germany and from Belgium that you highlighted the Convent of Mayors. We see this as a very important initiative and alliance to exchange between cities and also to support cities in their sustainable endeavor. And therefore, I think it was really valuable from a colleague of Belgium when you addressed the barriers in this also initiatives and how it could be, how to overbridge these barriers over time. So therefore, it would be good if you could elaborate a little bit more from your international development perspective on how you see that we can scale up such initiatives and approaches between cities. You also touched upon the importance of having tools, and on the European context, we have certain specific planning tools for that, like the urban environment self-assessment tools, which is just recently launched, and also urban development networks and so on. So what we really try to put emphasis on is how we can connect different networks to really replicate very good and scalable solutions across cities. And it will be interesting to hear your views on how you could see potential to share more good practices and examples between networks. Thank you.
I'll take one more, and then I will ask the panelists to respond. Malaysia.
Thank you, facilitator and all the presenters for the wonderful presentations. So I just would like to have the presenters from maybe Singapore and Germany. Maybe you can share with all of us. I can see in your presentation you are doing a lot of initiatives, especially involving the mitigation actions in the city. So as we know that the mitigation actions involves a lots of resources, especially funding, and then also the involvement of the private sectors. So could you share with all of us how do you guys engage with the private sector to implement some of these initiatives and these actions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so in your responses, if you could touch on any benefits that came back, economic, social, feel good. These are important as well. Camaraderie, if you're associated with another city and you're doing things jointly, just the fact that people are having fun and enjoying life is a reward. So any benefits that came, those questions span virtually everybody. So I'll start with Mr. Wagner and then work my way down the table. If you could address the question, if you miss any particular ones, forgive me if I point it out to you.
Yes, I hope I got all the questions down. So one was about the integrated approach and how this is also in relation to the government. Well, from a local city perspective, first of all, the integrated approach means that we coordinate our own responsibilities and fields of activities, and we therefore implemented a climate protection coordination center within the city that deals with all the aspects that relate to climate issues from on the local level, of course. And this is actually how we work. I mean, we try what we can do from the local perspective on our own responsibilities and abilities, and how this can be somehow coordinated. With the federal government coordination, I cannot give any answer to that because they're coordinating themselves, but we well notice there is maybe some more need for coordination also between different federal institutions, because they working on same policies, and sometimes the local level gets different approach from different areas. So there could be maybe some more coherence in sometimes in also what the state and the federal level federal level are doing, but I don't know whether this answers your questions, but please come back otherwise. The other thing was the private sector involvement. This is a difficult issue, of course, because the private sector often opposes to very ambitious climate initiatives. For example, the local the commercial people doing business in the town, they of course want, for example, people to come and have the possibility to go there by car, and we do not want that. So there are conflicts in this regard. We have very good examples with some of the companies here in Bonn. For example, DHL, which is headquartered here, they started their project of a CO2 neutral delivery of their deliveries here in Bonn, and this is quite successful. So there are companies that are well aware. We also work with other companies like Telecom. They, for example, promote home offices so they can reduce the need for commuting, people coming to Bonn and leaving the city. So there are good projects and good talks going on, but at the same time it is rather difficult to reach out to the private sector. That's for sure. I want to leave it at this for the moment. Do you have any other questions I forgot maybe?
There are a couple, but I'm going to hit them on Linda. The initiative is very advanced in Singapore. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit in answering on how that got started. Was there a champion? Was it some special event that caused it to start? And then it seems to now be integrated into normal life. So how did you transition from the startup? And you also have a lot of private companies involved. So if you could indicate again how private sector was involved. And then the question on the dissemination of information and knowledge sharing, et cetera, maybe you could touch on those three.
I guess the organization of the IMCCC, the Interministerial Committee on Climate Change, has really been quite instrumental in integrating our actions across all the relevant ministries, and that has really trickled into all aspects of government. I guess I hesitate to say it, almost a mainstreaming of climate interests. And what's important in sort of institutionalizing this within people is getting just the regular man on the street to acknowledge these initiatives. So one of the other smart things we're doing in our HDB estates and that they're going to pilot is the use of smart notice boards. So under each residential block, it'll tell you how much your block is consuming in terms of energy and how much recyclables you're collecting. So that can also be a way to sort of, you see visuals of these things every day, and that becomes part of your daily life. Regarding the question on private sector, thanks for the good question. I didn't mention in the living labs that we've set up, actually, they're usually co-funded. So the government puts in some money, but then the private sector also has to put in some money. So there is a little bit of involvement of the private sector in that way. And it makes sense for the private sector because a lot of things that they're doing there then results in commercial solutions that they can then market and actually make money out of. So there's a business case for them. We set out what the business case is for them so that we encourage more involvement from the private sector. And one of the ways we do this is to show, like, we put the solutions together to show the scale of what could be. So I told you about Solar Nova, where we aggregate all the demand across 831 blocks. There's no way a company could have gone around asking 831 blocks to please put solar panels on their rooftops. So when we do that work of putting stuff together and being like, here's something that you can make money off, why don't you try and invest in this? And then that kind of interests the private sector. So Sunseap was a local solar firm that won the first tender. And what's really cool about that is that they've gone on to actually win other tenders in countries such as Cambodia and India. So they've started in Singapore, they built the business model, they've built history, and then they've gone on to expand their business elsewhere. And of course, we're very happy with that. Thanks.
Thank you. It sounds as though they'll soon be having more competition from Malaysia. And I would like to ask Veronica really similar things, because you're at a different stage. Something must have sparked the country to look at the city and go, we have to do something. And usually that somebody gets the idea to spark it. And then, but you have transitioned to that becoming a plan, a national plan for the development of the city. So again, something transitioned it. And if you could also indicate if there's private sector envisioned there. So yes.
Thank you. The first question that Norway did, it's kind of the same. Right now, actually, the champion, as you call it, it's the mayor of Bogotá, Enrique Peñalosa, which is the one that brought these challenges on the table with the other municipalities and also with the national government that we should be planning 2050 Bogotá area, right? But in order to ensure that these strategies, urban strategies, and how we have to occupy our land and how we actually have to live, we've been working in two things. The first one is what is called in Colombia, it's POT, which actually sets the ground rules for in every city in Colombia for urban and rural development for the next at least 16 years minimum. So these rules cannot be changed for 16 years minimum. So we're working on that right now in Bogotá. Also, we're working, as I said, with the municipalities around in order to work with them their own POT. So that's gonna have at least ensure for 16 years. And the third one is that we're working together with the national government to make at least the more strategic regulations actually an obligation for all the cities in Colombia. So in that way, when a new major come in 3 years, it doesn't has a way out for the strategies, the large strategies for the land use. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will give the floor to Egypt in just a minute as the last speaker. But first of all, I was saving this particular component for Koen because it is very relevant to the work that they were doing. The development of the tools that you then shared in your twinning program, how you managed to do this knowledge sharing. And you also did the collaboration of mayors there. So if you could give a little bit of further information on that.
Okay, thank you. For the development of the tools, so it's civil servants working together. That means that our civil servants go over there twice a year and they come to us. Also, it's also a delegation of them coming to us and see how we work. And they have to see how a computer network works. How you make scans of a birth certificate. Very simple things. How does a library work? If you got a librarian in Bohicon and he doesn't know how a library works, he doesn't even know the alphabet. Then you can never never have a functioning library. So they come to us and we give them our knowledge. We share knowledge how things work. And I also wanted to, on Norway, was talking about the integrated approach on these climate actions. Well, we do that on 3 levels. If we go horizontal, then we have an intercommunal organization. The 50 municipalities of the province of Antwerp are integrated in one intra-communal organization who also has actions on climate changes. If we have to go up, if we're seeking upwards, then we go to Climate Alliance, for instance. We are a member of the Climate Alliance organization, and with that we can participate in the EU grants. If we have to go down, integrating down, then we go to our councils. We have an environmental council in the city of Zoersel, and we use them to contact our stakeholders. Stakeholders like the school, the local businesses, and the inhabitants. So it's on 3 levels. We do this integrated approach. And then also on the European Union about scaling up the work we do with communes in the south. I think it's very easy. You have to transfer money. You have to transfer money from the big government grants to the local entities. As I spoke before, I said that there is a lot of international development, but it's on too of a high level. The France, the United States, they give money to the governments of implementing this or that action, but the money evaporates. In Africa, it simply evaporates. You have to have a bottom-up strategy. You have local people working with local people here, municipalities between municipalities, people going over there, earning your trust, back and forth, working together, seeing projects, learning from each other, and that's how you make money work. That's with a small amount, you jump twice, 3 times, 4 times as far as just dropping money into a government. It just evaporates. You have to work together on a small local level. Okay, that was it. Thank you.
And yes, well, Egypt, you're actually going to be wrapping up for us. So just quickly, and then they're going to kick us out of this room.
Thank you very much, dear facilitator. I want thanks for all the participants for their sharing their knowledge, but I want to be more generic because our country has many categories of cities, mega cities, medium cities, and small cities. And the approach of the international cooperation between the two minor cities was very important and very vital for all of us. Does any approach for making twinning between the two mega cities, two middle class cities, two minor cities, if it is approach could be applied for all kinds of category of the cities, or it's only for the minor city? Thank you.
Well, I think it can be applied to all sorts of cities. We have only 22,000 inhabitants, and Bohicon is 10 times larger. They have 200,000 inhabitants. You're not working with the inhabitants. It doesn't matter how many inhabitants a city has. You're working with people. You're working with the head of the Department of Infrastructure. You're working with the mayor. You're working with the head of the department who registers birth certificates. You're working with the librarian. You're working with people. Then it doesn't matter whether it's 2 million or 20 million inhabitants in a city. You're transferring the knowledge to one person who in their turn will implement something, and then it benefits all. So I don't see a problem whether it's only 10,000 inhabitants or 1 million inhabitants in a city. You're working with people, with the civil servants. And
thank you. I think the message there is that the cooperation is between those who wish to cooperate. And the idea is to encourage them, and that they don't view it as there is this type or that type or the next type. It's whatever is those entities, those cities wish to do. And I hope that during the course of our discussions today, it sparked your imaginations and also showed that we're not discussing theory, but they're discussing what's happening. And you got a small little slice of a huge effort. If you had any doubts about the level of impact of cities, I can tell you that what is being done in Benin and Belgium is being done by Los Angeles. So on a grander scale with lots of others. It's being done by Paris. It's being done by Tokyo. It's happening, and it is to encourage all cities, all of you, to utilize the existing links that you have as the first step. I can tell you that my home country in the Bahamas, they have twinned with, oh, yeah, no, I'll leave that one alone. But to look at the variety of ways in which small scale, medium scale, large scale, where actions can be taken. And the impact that they have is really very, very significant. It's one of the hugest multipliers in terms of impact. So I want to thank you all, and look forward to seeing you participating in the other aspects of the technical examination process. And before my boss comes and fires me for dragging this meeting out, please enjoy your lunch. Thank you, my panel.